Hi everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the Author Journey. We have a great show for you today, so hang on to your hats. I know they're all great, but this one is amazing. So today we have Nova Scotia author Amanda Crewe, who is a manual osteopath, writer, and sommelier. I don't know how much of the interview we can talk about sommeliering, but we're going to bring that up too. She divides her time between Halifax and Cape Breton Island. Her love of writing was born from her love of Canadian literature, and she's pleased to be an active member of the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia. Of Monchach and Mantras, I hope I pronounced that right, is Amanda's second book, following her 2023 debut novel of Peat Moss Prayers. I have my signed copy here. We'll talk more about that as well. And in the summer months, you can find her hosting intimate writers' retreats at La Petite Maison in Cape Breton, where she spends her days on the beach with her two children. And I'm going to bring Amanda up to join me. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. We met just a week or so ago, and I'll tell you, there was not we barely drew a breath. We had such a wonderful conversation. So I'm really excited to introduce you to the folks watching and say hi to all the people. If you're watching, and don't forget, if you have questions and you're watching live for myself or Amanda, please fire them into the comments, and we'll get them as we're chatting. And we have our first comment. Hi guys, Sue Slade says hi and
Hi.
Welcome to and I think that Sue was the one that introduced us, if I'm not mistaken.
Sue has been incredibly supportive since the beginning.
Yeah, at Dartmouth Book Exchange, boy, we can certainly count on them to keep feeding some good authors into the author journey. So thank you so much, guys. So welcome, Amanda. How's your day going?
Excellent. It's been a great day. I finished up a very full day at my osteopathic clinic here and greeted my children coming home off the bus and have some hiking lined up for tonight. It's a beautiful day.
Wow, it is a gorgeous day. And I sit here in awe of you, full-time mom, a full-time business owner, and an author. So kudos to you. How do you juggle it all?
Thank you very much. I really like to stay busy. I really do. I always have. And I find that writing at night, it helps me transition from a very busy work day into a little bit of a gentler evening. It gives me a space to be creative. And it gives me something for my mind to chomp on, when I'm doing long drives to Cape Breton and things like that. So the writing has been extremely therapeutic for me over the years.
Oh, I love to hear that. How old are your kids?
They just had birthdays last week. So my little guy, Aiden, he's 8 years old now, and my daughter, Evangeline, just turned 10.
Oh my goodness. So they're of an age that they are really capable of entertaining themselves.
They're fabulous, and I have a fabulous co-parent. Max has been
Awesome.
wonderful, and their dad is with them now, and I'm really lucky. We have a great
That's
family.
fantastic. I'm sure they're doing their homework now, aren't they?
Probably having a milkshake or an ice cream right now.
I love it. Well, let's talk about this of Peat Moss Prayers. This gorgeous book, and I love the cover too. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to read the review that's right on the front cover because it just kind of encapsulates how I felt reading this book. It says the writing in this debut novel is raw, edgy, daring, and in its quiet moments, hauntingly beautiful. And that was Beatrice McNeill, author of Where White Horses Gallop. And you've mentioned before that Beatrice was an early inspiration to you. And how did that come about?
Oh, I wrote a short story when I was young. I was a child. I might have been I was in elementary school, and Beatrice came to the school to read a children's book that she had recently released, and it was fabulous. And because I had written a short story, the teacher had asked me to please, would I stand and read? And so I did. And so Beatrice was so kind to me and so gracious. And she invited me to attend an event of Fiddles and Prose. And she used to host these fabulous events that would focus on local authors, and, we'd have fiddle playing. And she asked if I might come and read. And I just happened to be invited to read on the evening that the National was covering that evening.
Wow.
What are the chances, and I wouldn't have known it then, and I really only found out this year, but Alistair MacLeod was there that evening, and, so I had no idea that any of this was, looking back, I do feel that life has you have a path sometimes. And Beatrice kept up. We lost touch over the years. She would always ask my parents how I was doing, and she was very kind and supportive. And so when I had this manuscript of Peat Moss Prayers, I thought, well, I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day, but I would really appreciate some feedback. And she's been a mentor, and I really respect her writing. And I asked her, would she maybe take a look? And she was very gracious. She read it in 2 days flat.
Wow.
And she came back and she said, you really have something here, and I think you should do something with it. So I'm very appreciative of her support. I can't say enough.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And that, what, that's something that sticks with a young person. When somebody is that supportive, and, you have that kind of memory, which is incredible. And I always say that, our region in Atlantic Canada, and, you're from Cape Breton, so that has its own special quality. The literary community is just so warm and welcoming and supportive. So it's really nice that started at such a young age. You talk about, and your writing is so poignant, and we'll dive a little more deeply into that. You talk about your love of Canadian literature. So, I mean, other than Beatrice, like, what other works sort of have stayed with you over the years?
I really continuously come back to Alistair MacLeod's short stories, Highlands. Some of those stories, I remember being, maybe a grade 5, grade 6 student, and having to take some of his short stories home to read. And I, read the whole book cover to cover. I think our assignment was to read one short story, and I crushed the book in, 2 nights flat and couldn't get enough. And so I've really absorbed his writing. No Great Mischief was a fabulous book. Really love The Spoon Stealer. That's got a very special place.
That is like my all-time favorite book, Leslie Crewe, The Spoon Stealer. Oh my gosh.
And, Where White Horses Gallop, I've read it twice. So Beatrice's writing is exceptionally beautiful. Even the way she speaks, she's very lyrical. She speaks the way that she writes. And Jan Martel, did Life of Pi. And so I love Canadian literature. Alice Munro, I could go on, but I really love what Canadian writers are doing.
Well, and it's easy to see in your writing, and I know this is your first book, and you have another one coming out very soon. The one I mentioned that I hope I pronounced correctly, Monchach and Mantras.
And it's a continuation. I know it's a little bit tough to.
No, I love it.
But it's essentially the same name as the first book, because I chose the Gaelic word for peat moss, and I went with mantras instead of prayers. So we're bringing in a little bit of Gaelic and a little bit of Sanskrit. Essentially, it's the same story, just kind of broken up. That has continued. So I wanted to have that continuity in the story, and so I kept the same name and just introduced a little bit of different differences in language. But it's going to be a tough one to pronounce for folks.
But it's okay. You can have a little phonetic glossary, and I think that's great. We're actually we're going to be launching in September a middle grade novel that is set in the Isle of Skye in Scotland. More about that down the road, but it was hard to kind of get into the momentum of how some of those Gaelic words were pronounced. But I think that's I love it. It's always good to learn something new. So tell us about the storyline of Peat Moss Prayers.
Okay. So this is a story. It is partly autobiographical in the way that I've pulled a lot of information from my travels over the years. So it is about a younger woman in her 30s who has left Cape Breton and has gone out to, create this fabulous life for herself, and chased, all of her desires. And things come kind of crashing down around her at some point. And just when things are starting to get very complicated with her relationship, she gets a phone call from home to say, "You've got to come back." And so she hasn't been home in 17 years, and reintegrating back into the community. I chose to set the story in Shetty Camp because it's an Acadian community. I myself am from Lordways, but Shetty Camp is a gorgeous place, and it was just a lovely location to, as I was picturing things, it was close to the Cabot Trail. I could really pull in a lot of elements from
Oh,
Cape Breton that work
beautiful surroundings. Oh my goodness.
So she comes home and she realizes that she's become this city girl, and she's trying to find her place and her role back in her family, and working with some complicated but understandable family dynamics, with her two brothers. And there's this dichotomy between the two brothers where, we've kind of got good and evil. And so she's a little bit with that, and she loves her father, but of course she's in the process of losing him. And at the same time, her relationship is falling apart. So she's just kind of at a crossroads in her life where she has to decide, am I going to go back out and continue forcing things, in San Francisco, or am I going to lay down some roots in Cape Breton? And it's a heartwarming story. I hope readers take it as a love story to the island, because it's very much this story of redemption of, you come home and you start to appreciate the things that used to just drive you away when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And themes and values in terms of family and connection and community, all of these things that are very dear to a Cape Bretoner's heart, this all comes through for her. And she realizes that maybe she's been chasing the wrong dreams, So she's got to make some tough decisions. And then throughout the book, we've woven in some international travel, a bit of a timeline with her memories for, her experiences and what's brought her to where she's at today. So it's kind of a hard look at some of the less palatable aspects of what it means to find yourself and use travel as a way to do that. Her story is uniquely her own, even though I borrowed some elements from my life and my travel journals and things like that. But, these characters really took on a life of their own.
As they do.
Yeah. And I can honestly say the book, it wrote itself for the most part. I think I really had to get things off the ground for the first, maybe 30%. And then honest to God, I just sat down and it just came out. So I don't take a ton of credit for that. Like these characters kind of created their own storyline, which was a lot of fun.
I love that. I love that. So you are obviously doing what you were meant to do, because most writers will say the same thing. Like, I have an idea and then my characters decide, what direction we're going to go in. And I'm sitting here nodding my head crazy because, there's so many similarities in our life paths. And, this book brought me to tears more than once. Had all the feels. I lived as an expat for 22 years. I had a homecoming, 8 years ago, after, an unfortunate, situation in my life. So there was so much that was relatable for me. And of course, coming home to Nova Scotia, like I grew up in Halifax, not Cape Breton, but same kind of thing, like reinventing yourself, but 20 some odd years later. So this book resonated with me so incredibly. So I want to make sure that we get in a reading. So if you've picked an excerpt, it might be a nice time to jump in.
I would, and I wanted to honor Beatrice a little bit too, because she kept coming back to a particular passage in the book, and she said, you've managed to capture that kind of essence of what Cape Breton's really like. So I chose a short passage that I'd like to read from chapter 2 to give a little bit of background. So I'll read that. It's called Hunger. So it goes, I'd grown up hungry, not in the way that my father and his siblings had hungered growing up, poverty gnawing at their empty bellies as they huddled for warmth on the cold winter nights, and not in the way that he continued to hunger all of his adult life for material objects that he thought would fill that void that still pulled at him. My hunger was different. It was a voracious beast, the constant wanting of the world. I'd been starved from the time I could remember. for knowledge, for passion, for meaning. I'd been so hungry all of my life, I couldn't recall a time when I wasn't yearning for more of everything. Traditional Chinese medicine had a term for a person like me, a hungry ghost, a soul with a long, thin neck and a distended belly that could never be satisfied. I had first recognized this hunger as a child who had become fascinated with learning about the inner workings of life. On the island, magic was everywhere. It was in the sound of the leaves rustling in the trees and the far-off bleating of the foghorn. It was in the dewy morning air and in the haunting cry of the loon echoing across the Bredor Lakes. The soul of Cape Breton was, I'd always thought, contained in the cry of a loon. One of my sharpest memories as a child was of walking down a dirt road at dusk with my father on a quiet evening. The crescent moon had risen in the violet sky when a nearby loon called out, its cry quivering the still air. As we walked, gravel crunching under our shoes, I had asked my father what had made the piercing sound. "It's the moon crying," replied my father. I remember looking up sadly at the moon hovering above the tree line, wondering how such a beautiful thing could be so sad as to cry out into the night like it had. Although I had more questions, we had trudged on toward home in silence, except for the occasional crying of the moon. It wasn't until years later that I would realize my mistake. But Cape Breton was such a magical place that you could imagine it was possible even for the moon to cry by times.
Oh my goodness. I have to agree with Beatrice. Like some of the passages are just so vivid and vibrant that, you know, you can hear the fiddle music, you can taste the cold beer, you can see like the room like throbbing with you know, pulsing with the, you know, people enjoying just being together, you know, in a smaller village in the local pub, right? So
Very
so
much small town life.
yeah, and you and I have, again, similar backgrounds. I have a background in Acadian French on my mom's side, but in New Brunswick. So what was it like to grow up in an actual Acadian village? Like, I'm jealous.
It was very quaint. It was lovely. You know, I kind of am dating myself by saying, you know, my kids are not going to have the same experience because of technology, but we really were quite how do I put it? We were very protected and cocooned, and nature played a huge role. You know, we'd be outside all the time. You know, it didn't matter the weather. You know, so we had picking blueberries, sledding in the winter, bonfires, and not so much stuff. You know, TV was boring. There was never anything on. You had a few channels. You know, so we were protected, and Cape Breton was kind of behind a little bit from mainland. You know, you were just, there was this buffer. So
and everybody played an instrument.
Because you're so bored, especially if the weather is that bad that you really can't be outside for long. And so everybody is so creative and storytelling, like the raconteurs. They, you know, my dad is one of these. He's been telling stories, you know, since we were very young. So a lot of storytelling, a lot of music, a lot of singing, a lot of baking. You know, you bake with your mom, you bake with your grandmother. The kitchen was the heart of the home. You know, a lot, you carry wood in because, you know, wood fire. It sounds very, you know, it was pretty traditional. And I really appreciate having that experience growing up because it does cultivate a person to have a good heart and to appreciate the smaller things in life, and
it grounds you, right?
Yes.
It grounds you. My new favorite cookbook, Tunes and Wooden Spoons, right?
That's great.
Like
That's
everything you cook is just, it's comfort food, right?
Yep.
You just can't. Hamburger soup, my favorite, right?
And you know, when you cook with your community or you share, you know, there's a part in the book where we're talking about the funeral and the wake. And that, you know, they said like weddings and funerals wove the community together. And that's very true. And so you'd see, you know, all of these people, you would see them at church every Sunday when you went with your parents. You would see them at all of the community events. You got to know their children. And even now when I go home, that sense of community that Cape Bretoners have, it's not, you can't find that everywhere. It's very unique.
Yeah. And your parents are still in Lordway?
Yeah, my dad is in
Your dad,
Lordways, my
nice.
mom's in Loch Lomond, yeah, and
Okay.
they're still, full-time Cape Bretoners.
Wow, that's awesome. So how does an osteopath come to be an author? And of course, you're both now. So
I'm both. I think I was challenged. I was writing a thesis to complete my osteopathic studies, and it was a
Mhm.
very intense process. And I was, expecting my second baby, so life was busy. And, I went from doing a year of sitting at the kitchen table writing and researching, and the thesis went well. And I was very grateful. I won an award from the school. And I thought, the writing, it was a little bit forced in the way that I had to produce the thesis, but I managed to make it fairly creative. And I thought, well, this is fun and it's very relaxing in the evening when things settle down. And I quite like sitting and writing. So I thought,
Mhm.
after I have the baby, and I'm taking a little break from work, it would really be nice to have something to work on. And so I started writing this story, and I didn't know what I wanted to say, but they tell you write what you know. And I thought, well, I'll write
Mhm.
about Cape Breton, and my experiences growing up. And one thing led to another, and these characters were born. So I think, I meet all these fabulous people through my job.
Mhm.
These people that come in, I've learned so much about them. 20 years
Mhm.
almost I've been working, and I'm still
Wow.
seeing the same patients for the most part. And they're like family, they become your community. And so I've just had all these colorful characters, all these wonderful people. I make notes, I had to, in my second book, there's an English gentleman who comes into the book, and some of the quotes that I'm using, it's because one of my patients has this magical way of speaking. He's from
I
England,
love it.
and so I take little notes here and there when I meet fabulous characters.
Oh, I love that. That is so incredible. Obviously, you're a natural, you're doing what you should be doing. So let's talk a little bit about the next book. So at the end, there is, romantic interest in of Peat Moss and Prayers. And so the next book continues that on. But what is the basic? And I wanted to say that sort of the end of the first book, of Peat Moss and Prayer, it takes a slight shift into a little more sort of internal dialogue. She's trying to kind of reconnect and find herself, a meditative healing journey. And is this meditation center that she goes to in the book, does it actually exist in Cape Breton?
It is loosely based. I've pulled a few different elements. So in Cape Breton, we have a Buddhist abbey, Gampo Abbey,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's lovely. And so that made an appearance in the first book. But in my second book, Leanna shifts to a little bit more of she's looking into yoga and Vedanta. And so Vedanta
Okay.
and Buddhism are related for sure,
Hmm.
strong ties there. But in the second book, she's finding that Buddhism is leaving her feeling a little bit empty. She doesn't have the community that she's really craving. And so she meets a character in book two that introduces her to her Sangha, her community. And so this ashram that shows up in book two is loosely based on an ashram I myself visit every year. And
Okay.
I took my children this year, which was lovely, and my
Oh,
mom came
cool.
years with me.
Very
Um,
cool.
so I took a few elements and some of the mantras and some of the daily rituals. So that's
Hmm.
all based in a real ashram life, and the
Excellent.
characters, of course, are made up. But Cape Breton doesn't, as of yet, have, as far as I'm aware, a yoga ashram that is, thriving, I guess, like the Buddhist community is. So I've
Hmm.
set it in southwest Mexico on the border of Guatemala.
Okay.
To pull in some other cultures as we'll see in book two. So it's a little, I wanted the setting that could have the potential to introduce international characters. And although
Mhm.
Cape Breton is wonderful, it's a little bit more traditional. And so she may not have bumped into all these fabulous, interesting people from all over the world. So in book two,
Mm.
we end up a very colorful and vibrant yoga ashram where she really delves in and has to take a good hard look at herself.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's coming out very soon. I can't wait to read it. So we have so much commonality, Amanda, because I did yoga training in Thailand.
Nice.
You know, that really does resonate with me. I spent a month in Guatemala learning to speak Spanish
Oh,
many
wow.
moons ago. I've spent lots of time in Mexico. So, you know, I, for one, will be first in line to
Amazing.
buy your next book.
What
So
are the chances? You know,
I
that's
know,
wonderful.
right? I know. So tell me just quickly about like what does a manual osteopath do? Now I'm curious.
Yes, so an osteopath is trained to assess and treat a disharmony in the body.
Mhm,
So we
mhm.
look at the body as a functional unit. When people come in, we're more so looking at what's really vibrant and vital in the person and hoping to boost that vitality, not so much looking at what's wrong or what's out of place, but we're looking at what health are we working with that's already in this person and how can we spread it basically. So we work a lot with um, the overall auto-regulation of the body, which includes working with the skeletal system. We work with the muscles of the body. We work with the organs and the endocrine system. So there's really not a whole lot that we're not looking at. We try and treat the person as one functional unit, and that a problem
Nice.
anywhere is a problem everywhere. So we try and bring about harmony.
Oh, I love that. And you're a sommelier.
I have a penchant for, I thought I
Good
love
wine.
I just love good wine so much and good chocolate.
Mm.
I'm French, and so I blame it on that. But I thought, I've had this passion for wine all my life, and I wanted to know more about it. And I do travel as much as I can, and I
I love
love
that.
sipping wine from different areas. So I've just finished up my Canadian diploma. I'm a graduate of the Canadian Association of Professional Sommeliers. Thank you. And I just
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I'm a level 2 for my international W set. So I'm hoping down the road, maybe pushing toward studying to do the very intimidating Master of Wines, but that's for like retirement.
Oh, excellent. Well, I can't imagine you retired, Amanda. And Sue says, meet you at her book launch. Now, have you scheduled a date for your
I
book launch?
have, I have. Yes, we're very lucky. We're the Mellow Mug in
Okay.
the area, UTech area. Beautiful cafe, beautiful coffee shop, owned by wonderful people. The owner, Marquesa, has been lovely, and she's
Nice.
invited me back to do my book launch on Friday, July 12th from 7 until 9. Open
Okay.
house. We welcome everyone. I'd love to meet everyone, and a lot of people are picking up their pre-order books. So my
Oh,
pre-orders are
excellent.
open. Yeah, and so we're doing the first round. I've just sent off today for the proofs. Everything is looking fabulous, and we're going to have hardcover and softcover on July 12th at the Mellow Mug.
Excellent. I'm very happy for you. Well, July 12th is my birthday.
Oh my
So
goodness! Happy
I
birthday
will
to
actually, thank you. I'll actually be touring the valley on my own wine tour with a bus full of crazy people. But I'll be thinking about you and I will hopefully get my very own signed copy. So I
Absolutely.
just wanted to make sure before we wrap up that people know how to find you. I did bring up your website here while you were reading your excerpt, and people can learn about you here. I'm going to also share this on your osteopath website, learn about your books, right?
Perfect.
And what else would you like to draw attention to?
Oh, I really love if you can see a little bit on the bottom of the screen, my Instagram feed is I just love doing grabbing photos of people who are internationally traveling and if they happen to bring a
Ooh,
book. So the book has made it to almost 12 countries, I think, now. And just really, I love getting feedback and photos from people who are taking it with them. So that would be lovely if anybody wants to keep
oh,
in touch.
that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
like Sue, like the Dartmouth Book Exchange. They have their tote and all kinds of pictures of where the tote shows up, which I love. So,
Same idea,
um,
exactly. Exactly. And
so what is your Instagram address? Let's just scroll up to
oh,
the
yeah,
top.
author, author dot
Dot.
Amanda Crewe.
Excellent.
So it's
So make
pretty,
sure,
yeah. That's it.
excellent. Make sure you follow
Yeah, I would love
Amanda
to.
on Instagram and also visit her website there. I'm just going to make sure I'm going to go back to the top there. So it's osteoheartwork.com/books. So what would you advise somebody who's got a busy life like yours? It's very impressive that you fit it all in. Who might be a working mom or single mom or just a busy person who wants to write a book. What would you recommend?
I would say any writing is better than no. It's like meditation. Even if you have
Mhm.
45 seconds, even just to journal your day, but try and carve out space somehow, somewhere for creativity, because that is so good for the soul. You need it. So just make time at the end of the day, even for 10 minutes.
Well, that's absolutely incredible advice, and I'm going to try and take that myself. I'm working on my next book. I just actually typed the end to my first shitty
Yay!
draft, so I'll be
Congrats. Huge.
jumping into the first round of edits before I send it off to my editor. So, and then we're just scrolling around the bottom, showing that the author journey airs on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. We will take a break for the summer, but I want to thank you so much for joining us, Amanda. It's been such a pleasure. I can't believe that went so quickly.
I
And
know.
also, people can reach out to you through your website or your Instagram and learn more about La Petite Maison as well, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. My little writer's retreat in Cape Breton on the ocean. I would love that.
I would love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching the author journey. Again, we're on Tuesday afternoons at 4 Atlantic time, but we will take a break for the summer. But we have one more episode next week, which is June 25th, before we take a summer break, July and August. But you can always watch any of our past episodes on YouTube. So please have a wonderful evening and happy reading and writing. And we'll see you next time on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell. Bye for now.